Blog Talk Radio.
You're listening to Change Agents Hall of Fame. Tonight, how Jim Morrison and music were used to spark the end of the Western heroic tradition. Our take, by promoting rock stars as antisocial role models, the pop cultures of the 60s and 70s destroyed social cohesion and any real sense of community, creating an unrealistic, individualistic, and self-centered social norm. Morrison's lyrics and those of the 60s rebel rock groups in general have gone down in history as reflecting the hopes and frustrations of disaffected youth. But it could be that they helped create a disaffected youth in the first place. Good evening, Brave Wolf.
Hi, Linda. Yes, I think they created this disaffected youth, and I think that they created this on purpose, and so that we would begin to worship the infant terrible, and this would be the Jim Morrison or the great intellect or kind of person that
whatever
we could...
acceptive type of artist they could...
Yes, and we forgive them all of their foibles because they were so cool, so anti-system, except in reality they were created by the system. And as we have learned on many of our programs, that these people could not become so popular on their own, climbing themselves, that they had to have this kind of backing. And if they were truly anti-system, they would have been put down for sure. And so what I think we can try to do is show that how Jim Morrison and the Doors especially became a weapon. Their music became a weapon to kind of socialize us, social engineer us, to make us isolated individuals, lost souls alone, and divided. The music, the message of the music was that there was this great divide between parent and young person, and that it couldn't be overcome, that they would never understand, the older generation would never understand. And when they demonized the older generation, what they did, they demonized not only the family structure, but they demonized any culture that came from the past. And so it was a way of really cutting anyone who got caught up in the music. They cut from the past, and they thought that, again, this idea that the progress came from them, the world started with them, and that there was nothing to look up toward. And that created isolated individuals. And when the social engineers wanted to end this, when the music weaponization had done its gone its due course and done what it was supposed to be done, then the isolated individuals, they immediately, as I've mentioned before, within months morphed into disco and the exercise clubs, which completely put everyone into their own body, into their own
frivolous.
Complete, yes, and community went completely out the window. And then we had Ayn Rand on the other side telling the elite children of the rich eastern seaboard in America, kids I went to school with, that they have a reason to be an individual, and that it was good to be predatory, and that it was good to be to get only for you, and not to build a culture, not to keep a community going. And then we have our predatory hedge funds today, and our incomprehensible to me frauds on a massive scale, the plundering of economies. And I think that leads from this kind of music. I think this was a step to really cut all the tethers from the individual soul and leave people floating in the breeze. And it was the same Excuse me. Anne Rand's philosophy, which was put forth in her book and the movie, The Fountainhead, was that by becoming, as you say, predatory and getting to the top of the food chain, so to speak, people were expressing the highest potential of humanity as a species. So it was kind of a reverse idealism. But there were no ethics involved with it. And anything higher is always done for someone else. It's always. If you go back into European tradition of pilgrimages and quests and mythology, which is in a way reality for the European soul, it's that we do that for the woman of our dream, and that this is done as a commitment and a sacrifice for her. And her incorporates a myriad of feelings, and not just male-female dynamic, but belonging to a culture. And Ayn Rand didn't. She was there purposely put to make us all individuals, so that our instinct would not be community, and make us feel good about it. Yes, to pat us on the back, or to pat ourselves on the back for doing what, if it feels good, do it. You've said to me at one point that the Western heroic tradition was replaced by a false individualism. Are you referring to the myth of the rugged individualist as an American cultural myth? And sure, is that also the James Dean, the false rebels, these kind of, even the writers, the Jack Kerouac, the Beat generation, these people who supposedly went against the system, and yet they were in the New York cafes being published by the system. The Allen Ginsbergs of the world. These groups who were supposedly transforming culture in a free way were false rebels, absolutely false rebels. And they were media creations, and they knew it. They all ended up back in New York, where the contracts could be got. Whether it was literature or music, there was never any cohesion. They were encouraging people to live on it. They were encouraging people to go out to the edge and live on an edge that they themselves were never really living on. No, yes, exactly. Or they were preying as predators on those who were living on the edge. And that was many times the case, that the ones who asked for the young people to go out on the edge, they were feeding off of them. And these people were unprotected. And that is kind of the whole point of what this music as a mind-changing agent came in and surrounded a person, cocooned a young person, And then within that cocoon, there were these messages pumped in, injected in, and it was, which kept them from any real community. And we've talked about the danger to a human being who has no real community. They're unprotected from the fox in the hen house. They never work together. And this is what's happened in American culture. We've become a business. We are not a country. We are a business. We are incorporated. And we never work together, especially in the last 10 or 15 years. I don't know if there is this dynamic, and it wasn't always this way. So tonight I would, just like to open up the idea that that within the music, the social engineers opened up portals to let a transformation take place of the human being without them even knowing about it. And now we have earbuds and earphones that make us completely isolated within the music. It locks us into a world where no other voice can get in. You see it on the trains daily. Everyone is locked into that message. And if you are a child growing up hurt or a little different, it can be a protective cocoon, but nevertheless a trap. And then it you become addicted to it because you believe it protects you. And I think music can be a drug. I love music, but its repetitive beats and words do sound like a shaman beside the fire, chanting drums, inducing kind of a trance-like state. And then what happens when we give ourselves up? What happened when the Doors music, which was very trance-like, Jim Morrison would not, when he performed live, he would not look at the audience. He turned away.
At first, yes, when he first started out.
Yeah, it's a very trance-like condition. And he is an interesting character. He never knew how to really play music, I think. Again, I think he was... I really think that because of his... I think he was manufactured, yes. His father was one of the mid-level change agents who put us into the Vietnam War. He led the naval force in the Gulf of Tonkin that created a false flag attack whereby the American people were told that the North Vietnamese attacked American ships, and that began the Vietnam War for the Americans. And so this meant that Jim Morrison's father had the highest level security and was trusted to undertake a situation that would lead to 50,000 deaths and millions of deaths of Vietnamese civilians and soldiers, and catastrophe for South Vietnam. Their social structure is destroyed in 1975, their environment. So all of this was put into play by Jim Morrison's father. And I cannot, living in the real world, I cannot believe that if this man so high up in the power structure to be trusted with this kind of situation and not to speak about it, to keep secret about this, if his son was really a danger to the system, they would have killed him right away. And they didn't. And I think Jim Morrison, near the end of his life, he gained a lot of weight. He literally changed his features when he began to go to Paris. And I think there was a disconnect there. I think he was being manipulated. I don't know if he woke up, but I think that everything around him became unreal. It became illusion. And
he was
he had nothing
bloated
to hold
by
on to.
alcoholism. He was a hardcore alcoholic by the time he went to Paris. And
I don't think there's anything. I think it was deeper than that. I think the alcohol probably was helping him cope with the emptiness. I think that he himself knew that the message. I knew at some level that the message he was preaching was it was completely empty.
It was a lie. Well, I was going to ask you about that. Really, because the mythology about Morrison is that he was a highly creative and artistic person, and because of his addictions and to drugs and his alcoholism, he became, he destroyed himself. He was self-destructive, and then, sucked everything into a black hole with him. But again, it could be that the real problem was not that he was an alcoholic or drug addict, but that he was living a lie and so used those things in order to, assuage his guilt.
To fill himself up, to give himself some kind of feeling or non-feeling, probably both. Yes, he was emptied. I think a lot of these people were emptied, and they don't believe in what they were mind-changing the millions of young people. And again, that it goes completely against our what we've tried to say in this radio show, how the Western heroic tradition that isn't just pretty words or romantic words. There is a Western heroic tradition that began with Beowulf, and I think Morrison and all that social engineers wanted to do with him went against Beowulf. And Beowulf was this Gothic sojourner, and more than a king, more than a Grendel battler who defeats Grendel and Grendel's mother and the dragon. Beowulf represents a code, a type of human being who finds himself doing battle with the forces that are in this world and the other realms. And he makes himself into a higher self in these battles. He finds himself, and he welcomes these challenges to become a higher self. And he doesn't win his battles with Grendel, especially Grendel, with swords or with some artificial constructs. He wins it with his own inner light. Beowulf has the power to grip Grendel and to rip his shoulder and arm and hand off. And Grendel goes back into the lake and dies. But Beowulf does that with his own inner light. And this was the message of that story, that he put down his armor and sword and found what was inside him. And this is the heroic tradition. The gold and treasures are another name for finding the treasure inside us. And this is what Beowulf and the heroic tradition was trying to tell us. Let's be more like the great Goth king. I know I've been looking for it. I know because of my European background and my Europeanness, I've always been looking for the heroic tradition before I even realized I was looking for it. And I needed it. It was a spiritual food for me. I needed to know that there was a Beowulf out there that tried to be the best of himself. And I think the heroic tradition, however you can find it, is your link back to your soul culture. And growing up in the anti-culture that we have, I rejected, without knowing why in the beginning, the lack of the heroic tradition. And it made me ill to be in contact with anything that denigrated or ignored the heroic aspect. And this is why reading Ayn Rand and these complete individualists that were anti-heroic tradition really made me awakened in me an awareness that my generation was heading for the abyss by following this woman and by trying to reclaim the magic of the Doors in the late 70s when there was no magic at all. And again, I think they cut off our connection to the little stories and the little treasures that Beowulf found in the dragon's lair and under the sea, in that lake and within himself. And I had to look for those things well into my adulthood, when my European landscape moments really woke me up to what was inside me. And then I found a personal heroic tradition that meant something to me that was really the opposite of this false rebel, and that was not a weapon, but was a kind of a balm to a healing moment for me to reawaken the heroic tradition. And I learned about a family, a man, a town, and his people were being hunted across a river. And this man stopped in midpoint. And he stood there and he had a choice to make. Either he runs and escapes and he's going to be free, or he stays and helps pull across the children and the mothers and the old people. And that's all that is left in this area in April of 1945. And this town is terrified of the rape and the killing that is coming from the invading soldiers. And he stands there, and again, this is a true story. And I didn't learn this until just years ago, a few years ago. And that man stood there in that river and chose to stay. And the story came to me that he was a tapferen wolf, a brave wolf. And this was the name they called him for staying in the middle of that river and pulling the people across, when he could have saved himself by simply running across and not looking back. He could have forgotten his world, he could have forgotten his people, his family, his homeland, and lived. But he was connected to more than himself. He was the opposite of Jim Morrison. He was full of something, of this tradition that became his instinct, his soul. And he was not a modern individual. His tree roots went deep into the soil of those who would die or be raped without his help, or to be driven into the woods insane. So he stood in that water and helped his true identity cross the river. And because I grew up in a Western world that hated itself, and that still hates itself, I didn't know about this story, this river, until I returned to my spiritual landscape and began to walk in the snow in Potsdam and Berlin. And I learned that the man in the river had my name. And that's when I knew what family meant and what homeland meant and what
your name meant.
Yes.
On an additional layer.
Yes, and I think in a way I became free then. No matter what they can do to me, I have that, and perhaps they don't. And they can't transform me anymore. And I think when we all find that moment, and everyone has that moment, everyone, whether it exists in the past of their life or perhaps it exists in their future, I don't know. But everyone has that moment that links them to something that they love. And for me, that was so opposite of what Jim Morrison and these false rebels gave us.
Yeah.
Because that story never left. I'm sorry, Linda, go ahead.
The anti-heroic tradition basically poses the question, does great art or creativity excuse all excess and cruelty and narcissism and irresponsibility on the part of the artist, or in modern terms, celebrity, because really our celebrities are a substitute for our heroes or our artists. And then it answers the question, yes. It does excuse all those things.
Yes. Yes. Nowadays they titillate us. Our culture is wants these people to be abnormal and in a way dangerous. And that's why they do, to bring this probably music show up until the modern music, this Miley Cyrus and her going from Hannah Montana, which is a pre-teenage show, which is a kiddie show who tries to attract the 9 and 10-year-old girls. And that is advertised even for the younger kids. 5, 6, or 7, and then they turn her into really a prostitute. They degrade her into she's, I don't even want to say sexual, or sensual. It is so ugly, and she has been made ugly. No matter how they think that she is seductive or beautiful, they've really denigrated the female form.
And all the while her father is right there supporting her.
Yes. And
to make this transition.
And to the point where Sinead O'Connor has come out to say publicly that the music industry is using, she wrote a letter to this young singer and said, the music industry is using you, and they're destroying you, and they will continue to do that. So I think little by little, I think our message, does resonate with people who are looking at things with open eyes. And I think that the heroic tradition of no matter what culture you find yourself in, there is that heroic tradition there in every culture. And when we find that, then the weaponization of the music and these false rebels will become ineffective. And then we will be able to defend ourselves. And that time is coming soon where we will have to defend ourselves from this inner conflict. Well, I hope we touched on some interesting aspects.
Yes, I think there were many connections that were made between the way a mythology or the way traditions define a culture or define a community.
Oh, that's a great point.
And allow it to function.
Yes, exactly.
With some kind of synergy, yes. Coming from diverse backgrounds.
That is the point that everyone needs to be considering, Linda. Yes, what you just said.
Okay, well, thank you for your take on the way the music industry has been used to shape our ideas about who we are and who we are as human. And good night to anyone who's listening. Good night, Brave Wolf. And this show will be on YouTube as a graphic audio show. So thank you, and good night.
Good night.